settled in, we'll get started. Calling to order. So if we want to start with the roll call, starting in the far corner over there, please.
Megan Reed, Assistant Principal, Sunapee High School.
Jody Bergen, Principal, Sunapee Central Elementary School.
Lizzie Nichols, Student Body Representative.
Carrie McCawclaw, School Board Member.
Andy Nichols, School Board Member.
Scott Richmond, School Board Member.
Jesse Tyler, School Board.
Russ Holden, Superintendent.
If you could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, moment of silence, please. Behind by the door. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have, right out of the gate, we have reorganization. I'm thinking of modifying our order just slightly so that the board, we're going to jump right into it if you guys are ready. The board can each comment on the election day yesterday. Your thoughts are, a little, I guess, less than 24 hours after the polls closed. We need to talk about a reorganization of committees. So for people who don't usually attend school boards or know the depth to which they work, the one legal required committee for a school board or subcommittee is wellness. So we have a series of committees that we've historically had. We've changed them over the years, or the boards have changed them over the years. This is technically a new board, so we need to go through that. Every year you get a new board. In this case, Scott has another year. If you have another, you both have another 2. Ed Anderson is very passionate and dedicated. He also happens to be retiring after 27 years of service. So he sends his apology that he's not here, but he is somewhere else being celebrated for 27 years in law enforcement. So we're very appreciative to have him. He shared a couple comments with me that I'll filter in his absence. But because Ed and I ran again this year, nobody ran against us. Ed and I are on the board for another 3 years, so it'll be a familiar series of faces. So one of the first things we have to do is talk about committees. For clarity of how this works, often school boards will talk about the committees, jump in, hash and negotiate. We don't actually have to decide who's on what committee tonight. We should make sure that's done by the end of the April meeting. I wanted us to have a discussion. I'm going to ask us to have a discussion of what committees might be appropriate relating to the vote yesterday. So I thought it'd be better to just, even though it's not on your agendas, start with the board sharing their individual voice each on their thoughts on the election yesterday. Then we can get into committees, get into some of the formal things. There's 2 opportunities for public comment, and we can go from there.
Can I give you one organization?
Yes.
Could you ask for recommendations for chair to start your meeting?
So recommendations for chair,
Motions?
motions, discussion. Motion and seconded so we can have a discussion.
I'll make a motion that Jesse Tyler would be our chair.
I'll second that motion.
All right, seconded for discussion.
Sorry, Jim.
That's all right. I wasn't intentionally skipping that. I missed that in my notes. I know we have to start with that. So, you want me to be chair again or continue?
Unless there's another motion.
So, all right. I am proud to serve as chair. I think it'll be helpful to have the committee discussion so that we, my single voice as a member is that we have a really frank discussion tonight about leveraging everybody's strengths. We're, in my opinion, very lucky with the board that we have, the different experience that we have. Project management, contracts, building, finance, HR, all of those things, police chief, business owner. I think it'd be really healthy to start off the new year or the new board really getting into it tonight on the committee. So with that statement, I guess, all in favor of a motion for me to be the chair again this year, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm gonna be your chair this year.
Vice chair next.
Vice chair. I get to make, well, I don't, one of us gets to make a motion for that. So the vice chair steps in when the chair is not available or ill or otherwise. I realized in the last 3 years I didn't miss a single meeting, so I'm hoping that vice chair is even more appealing than it would usually be as a public servant. So without sort of a playful or vengeful motion, I'm gonna look to you guys for a motion for who you feel collectively as a voting majority should be the vice chair for this coming board.
I didn't think about that and all the things I thought about last night.
I'll make a motion to have Scott Ritzman do the question.
I'll second.
Okay. How you feeling, big guy?
Keep up your perfect attendance.
All right.
I'll accept.
Okay. All in favor of motion to have Scott as vice chair for this year, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
I'm suspecting like several people in the community, I know I speak for myself, I'm a little tired, so bear with me as we run the meeting. I'll get my cadence down. All right, I'd love to hear, we're all individuals, we have to work effectively as a board, but there are a lot of different opinions and ideas, and the best way for the public that elected us to understand them is to hear them. Does somebody want to break the ice on their thoughts on the election yesterday, the results leading up to it? This is a chance for us in an unfiltered way to share where we're at with a community that's highly engaged. So please, I'll add to it, but go for it.
I'll start off. I'm glad to see, I'm just trying to pull up the ballot. You know, I was happy to see that, you know, all of our articles passed, except for not happy to see, obviously, that Article 3 didn't pass. But everything else passed with, you know, big majority, so that was good. I'm disappointed that we're gonna miss this fabulous opportunity to have a super low bond rate. I think that, you know, we'll ultimately, hopefully end up doing something to improve our school system, but I'm sad that we're not gonna be able to take advantage of that low bond rate. And, you know, a lot of work went in from the community, super proud of them. The turnout that we had was incredible. Just unfortunate that we didn't quite make it.
Sure.
Yep, so I, trying to focus on the positive and not the negative, obviously disappointment with Article 3, certainly. I think the positives for me, largest voter turnout ever that I can see on record, so that's really huge as a community. I think that's really important that people are engaged. It means they care. The student engagement in particular was so incredibly inspiring, whether you support or don't support what was proposed and on the ballot. I can't say enough about what that says as a community for the families who have raised these kids, the teachers who have taught them. I think that's just hugely important, just a real grassroots effort to rally behind something that they believe so strongly in. And not to discount what the adults have done, because there was obviously a lot of effort behind the scenes, but I just think in general, there's a lot of passion that went into both positioning your case for and against why we needed to do this. So I think that's important for us as a community and a good foundation to start from. I'm also really encouraged that all of the warrants, except for 3, received 60% or better of the vote. That looks to me like a really strong response and tells me that there's a lot of support within the community, regardless of the fact that Article 3 failed. So that's encouraging to know that there's a foundation on which to build. For me, I think the important element now is trying to dissect, obviously where we go from here, but dissect for those who support the school but may not have voted in favor, because obviously those numbers are not aligning. Where have we missed the mark? What is it, is it the plan you don't like? Is it just about the dollars? We have to get to the bottom of that, and I think there's a number of things that have to be addressed through some of the subcommittee discussions that hopefully we'll have to figure out how we get down to brass tacks on that front.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's really cool that we ran out of ballots. That's an amazing thing, really. I mean, that's phenomenal, and we have almost half the town voting instead of a third of the eligible voters, so that's awesome. That's really wonderful. We obviously brought a lot of things out that people were really excited about, and as the others have pointed out, it was great to see everything pass by significant margins. And even with, the building, even with Article 3, we went from 40% to just under 50%. And I think there's something in that that's really, significant. Of the 500 additional voters compared to last year's building project, 2 out of every 3 of those additional voters did vote yes for Article 3. And so there is, something significant in that. And as we regroup, we're not going to sit up here tonight, I think, and try to come up with all of the answers and chart out a new plan, the morning after. But I think at the end of the day, it's evident how many people in this town really care about the school system, really embrace it. A very clear and strong message from a lot of people is that, K through 12 needs to be here, and we need to figure out how to get that done one way or the other, not just for next year or the year after, but for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now. And so as we move forward and probably over the next meeting or 2 come up with a new path forward, I think we need to look at, as Carrie said, why didn't we get that extra 10%? And what can we do to fill in the blanks to put together a plan that will, achieve a 60% vote next year?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think, thank you to the community, the students, the incredible engagement, the incredible time. Boards don't pass bonds, communities do, voters do. So, I guess the one thing I'll add, because I agree, support everything that all of you said, so I don't want to repeat it. I guess the one thing I would say is I think we got a lot farther by including the community, significantly more than the prior year. And I don't know about the time between 2004, it was a long time ago, and I don't know that it's a relevant perspective. But I think starting just over a year ago, just less than a year ago, was starting in this room and saying, what do you think we should do? I think we've got a lot farther. People support things that they see themselves in and that they help build. So I think with the conversations we have next year, whether it's on the plan that we had, other potentials, Article 8, understanding that consideration with the topic of school choice that got a lot of votes for us to consider having a committee to do so. I think the more that we can extend the community involvement, the more likely we're going to find what that solution is to have 60%. And if we do it right, it'll be higher than 60%. Bonds don't always skid across at 60. Sometimes they come across in the 70s or mid-70s. So as much as it's disappointing that we weren't able to provide a new elementary school, I'm also encouraged whether my body language or tone is showing it, I'm also encouraged by a lot of positive elements that you've covered all very effectively. So I think I'm gonna propose before the end of the night, an element of rest from the rest of this month for us and the whole community, and come back, if we leave with things to think about, both the board and the community, and we come back with some refreshed energy in April, we can dig into the subcommittees and the different conversations we need to have that'll benefit the future of this town. The board is to do policy and provide safe education space, and our responsibility is to move the district forward, so I think that's what we're gonna do. Did you wanna, you're pretty busy with all of this, running the district, why don't you give your 2 cents?
I don't have much to say on top of what you folks said, and I would echo that. Again, I'm just really encouraged by the engagement of the community to have a conversation about public education. Public education nationally has been under a lot of scrutiny, and for this community to really stand around and have that conversation, but more to engage in the conversation with each other, with our students, with other community members, regardless of what side of the article you were on. It's inspiring as an educational leader to know that public education is still alive and well and people still cherish what it provides our children. So I thank you all for that, and the board.
I'm proud to serve. All right, any other comments you wanna make? So, committees. I'm gonna do this, you already know this, but just seeing new faces in the audience. So what we had last year was capital improvement. Andy and I with Scott as alternate. Often those topics were talked about on the board, but you can only have 2 board members on a subcommittee. I talked to the School Board Association attorney for any other creative way to do committees so we can better leverage more talent on the board and not have 2 people doing too much of one and others not as much. The key to being able to leverage more of the board's experiences really comes down to how we structure the committees and what they're responsible for. So that's why I'm trying to kick off this conversation this way. We had capital improvement, finance, negotiations, policy. So we had the 4. Our policy is subcommittee is very strong. So starting this conversation off as a board member, not as a chair or telling anyone what to do, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I hope we don't disrupt our policy committee. We're really on that. We do a really good job. So I'm hoping there's consideration that we can continue that committee. Negotiations, really, unless something comes up with the active contract that we're in the first year of, that's more ad hoc. There's not going to be anything. There's a 3-year contract. We've got a little bit of time before we need to have a negotiations committee. So I'd like to just let that sit, and we can address that if it's needed as we go and not have a diversion of energy or resources. Our finance team, I don't know, I forgot the numbers, Adam memorized this morning, but I don't think school board ballots, I've never seen one where the budget passed by 250, wasn't it? 200, something like that. You know, I was talking to a coworker, a lot of us at Hypertherm serve on boards, and I was talking to a coworker, and their school board budget passed by 8 votes. It's a very different feeling than having ours passed by
63%.
Yeah.
Versus
So
56% last year, so.
So I don't want to my personal opinion as one board member is let's not disrupt what our community clearly greatly values and trusts. So I'm seeing policy and finance as stay the course. We've had Kevin's here tonight. Kevin's run the advisory budget committee. We've had large attendance at meetings, a lot of different people there. I hope we don't do anything to disrupt that. I think it's great. So we've got 2 committees. What do you guys think on capital improvements? If we change nothing, that's really only what we have left. And there's 5 of us to spread among the 3. I think there's an opportunity to rethink how capital improvement is done. So it's not 2 of us carrying the broader weight. So I have some ideas, but I've talked enough. We should hear your voices. What are your thoughts around capital improvement and how we can think differently? And even if there's anything that we've missed as a potential committee. We only legally have to have 1. If we've got great success with a couple. Are we missing any, or do we rethink capital improvements as a couple different committees?
I think if we wanna pull in more people to the, to help with improvements to the school, that, I mean, the state allows to have a subcommittee to the capital improvements committee.
We can have,
You're bad odds.
we can have ad hoc, well, yeah, we can have ad hocs, we can have citizens advisory committees where the citizens go off and come up with ideas or do research and come back and advise the subcommittee, which brings it to the board. So we have a fair amount of leeway to engage people. I'm hoping with a different talent and experience in the community that we can leverage it more effectively, just like we're trying to with the board. So I think there's a few, our responsibility is to frame it very carefully. What is the role? What is the responsibility? Who's accountable? Is it, you know, what's the duration? Is it just to figure out one thing and it disbands? That's the fun that we need. Once we start to figure this out, that's what we can think about over the next month, is structure and do a little research to come back in April and turn these things on. That's my recommendation. And that was supported by the attorney. So, can you talk more about what you have in mind, or give an example?
Well, we have so many issues that are going on here. I mean, we have actual maintenance issues that take up quite a lot of time just to try to figure out what we're doing. Roof, HVAC.
Right.
You know, safety things at the other school, you know, so we have more of a maintenance committee. And then I think we have a capital improvements committee as far as if we're gonna move forward and try to figure out a solution to the big problems, so like our school in need.
Right.
And we also have a major fields issue still.
Right.
So, you know, we didn't fix anything with this year, except for we did make some improvements at the high school with some long needed HVAC improvements. You know,
But that
we put some
field-
air handlers.
That field is still likely to be used very little because of problems with it.
Correct.
And
we're coming into baseball season and.
modulars aren't getting any younger. None of the safety and ADA or any of the things that drove the project, they're all just advancing while we're having this conversation, let alone the next year when we figure out what we wanna do. So, other thoughts, so maintenance, capital improvements, fields.
So, I think before I weigh in on this, because I think my thinking is kind of aligned with Andy's, I think, and whether this is a subcommittee or not, I don't know, but I think there's an important element that we have to maintain over the course of the coming months and year, and I think that's around community engagement, whether it needs to be a subcommittee that focuses on that, I don't know. But to me, before we run, before we can walk, I think we need to start there. I think we need to figure out how we're gonna engage the community, whether it's a forum that kind of takes a look at how we landed where we are.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it to be that it's gonna be a, bickering back and forth, that's not the intent, but we do have to gain some intel somehow to dissect where we go from here. I think we need some significant input, whether it's surveys on seats to say, help us understand why we didn't earn your vote. Something, I don't know that that's the answer, but I think there has to be some community involvement to help us figure out what the options are that then guide the actions of the SIP committee and how we further define that. So that's kind of, I think we have to put some focus into that and solve for that piece first as the starting point. And then as far as the SIP committee goes, I think we do have to look at, what does this information tell us that we can glean one way or the other, whether it's exit survey, whether it's community forum, whatever. We have to define what our priorities are. The immediate needs stuff that we have to focus on no matter what. We have to, I think, as a board, decide what our risk tolerance is to continue to not take action on some of the immediate needs stuff. And, and then I don't know that we can define what the current plan is or the next steps are until we kind of cross some T's and dot some I's in that regard, because I don't know if we're talking about a revision to the current plan. I don't know if we're talking about something completely different. I just don't know that yet. But I think that will help us to evolve what the needs of the SIP are going forward. So that's my feelings on the SIP. I have thoughts around other things.
That makes a lot of sense, I think, because once we know how we're gonna proceed, we can better break down the load that the two of you really had to carry, and you guys worked awfully hard. We can't put you through that again, so, you know, like Harry said, if we decide to take what we leverage the plan that we had and talk about how it can be done differently. I mean, one example would be what's gonna happen to the old building if we build a new school. Maybe there's a subgroup that addresses that issue.
So I think teeing up on that, I think there's a whole other subcommittee that forms, that focuses on financials. Whatever that looks like, whether it's evaluating.
Operating costs.
It's operating costs, it's
Operating
operating
costs.
budget, it's fundraising, it's evaluation of current assets for, you know, future plans for what we do with those assets if, you know, if we no longer need them. So I think there's a whole financial subcommittee that has to be formed with a focus and define what that strategy looks like and what's the scope and breadth of what they need to do.
Yeah.
And of course, some of that can't be decided until we know, you know, what our way forward is, but there's some elements that can move
Yeah.
forward in the meantime.
So it almost seems like we have to, you know, continue on with the capital improvements committee the way that it is until we have a little more intel. Because we still have to take care of the maintenance on the buildings, we still have to, you know, make sure the roof's okay. We have to be able to watch all those things and meet about them, because we've got, I mean, I know everybody saw when they went to go vote at the Sherb the other day, we've got stairs that are falling apart at the Sherburne. You know, we
Yeah.
have some issues that still need to be taken care of every day.
Right.
So we need to be constantly involved in that, and I think that there's a whole lot of committee involvement a little bit further down the road.
Yeah. So, if we are all at a meeting and making board level comments and decisions, so it's a school board meeting. I think there's potential, when we talk about, going back to, I agree with understanding the vote, not 23 and a half hours later, understanding the vote, understanding the community, having dialogue, and understanding is a good starting point. Just like the forums we've done before, we can all be in attendance and be listening and asking. You know, it's inappropriate to say, we're gonna do this, or we're gonna do that, what do you think? If it's listening and asking, that's appropriate. And all of us are gonna hear the same thing, potentially different, so we can leverage that. So I think that the community engagement has potential as an entire board. Maybe doesn't need to be necessarily a subcommittee, or somebody after that, or one or two people could take it forward from there. But I think it would be good if we have an initial conversation with the community, that all of us are there. Or maybe the person who's gonna lead it leads that forum, but the rest of us could at least listen. So I have maintenance, which is urgent. We have lots of things you didn't mention, but the stairs were kind of embarrassing, unfortunately. Maintenance that has to be ongoing, and navigating how we keep it safe and commit to those expenses without overcommitting if there's a different plan in the future. CIP, and I took that to mean just more looking forward from what are the scenarios we want to consider.
Yep.
Definitely would be good, I second the motion on a field-specific subcommittee. These are the fields we have for the next year. How do we make the most of it? What are some potential things we could do to improve them? Whether that's budgeting next cycle, private booster club type of thing, or something else. So I definitely think that makes sense. Immediate needs and risk tolerance, I think we should flesh that out a little bit more. And I think the financials around the op cost is interesting. You think of any other?
Two other thoughts. So one, and again, I think this is a little bit futuristically later in the year and not needed right now, but I think we have to have a group that's focused on the academics and the administration, depending on which way we go. So we knew that if this vote would have passed into a single campus, we would have to be having some discussions about organizational structure, what that means in terms of staffing needs, personnel, departmental needs, whatever, all of that stuff that's covered, what's the impact on how we operate as a single campus versus how we operate as a two-campus structure that we currently do now. So I think that's premature, but I think that's something that we have to just keep in mind for later, depending on what decisions we land on.
Yeah.
And then the other element and this is more just a recommendation, and I think this would keep us in the spirit of what we've learned through Article 8, with each of these subcommittees, my recommendation is that we engage people from the community. There's a lot of talent and big brains in our community, and we leverage those as they align to the relevant subcommittees to bring in that external input and help act in advisory capacity to help guide our decision-making.
Yeah, well, also specific to Article 8 is structure, so I've already had people who were not supportive from the beginning, be vocal about Article 8. I had people, several people who were really excited about the school also voted yes on Article 8, say, well, if it doesn't pass, we should look at this. We should talk about how education looks in Sunapee. So I think whether, it's not gonna be the Article 8 committee, but I think looking at how we're structured and listening to 800 people who voted yes, whether they said yes or no to 3 is kind of irrelevant, in my opinion, is have those conversations. I think there are different comments along the way about what some of the other education options are. If we don't get our act together as a community, I've gotten a lot of heat for it, and I'll take whatever comes after this sentence, but none of the urgent need has gone away. We're all tired. There was a lot of progress in a lot of ways, depending on how you look at it, pro or not. We still have a serious problem, and we still have some time urgency, and we have some safety urgency. So, taking a look at all of these things, I think, is what we have to do for the community.
Can I offer you a suggestion?
Please.
As you move forward. So, I'm gonna build off Kerry and Andy. We have a capital improvement committee. I think at this point, having the administration along with Matt, we've just received 9 months worth of great information from our architects and our estimators. We should take that, we should compile that as an administration, determine where those needs are regarding safety, space, and maintenance, and bring that as a CIP committee, have those discussions, and let that CIP committee then start to prioritize or look what those might be. And then from there, as Kerry and you were just all saying, start putting out your subcommittees. So build our need from CIP, and then from there, build your subcommittees right off of that. So now you'll have something to work on. All right, we now realize we have $8 million worth of needs that we need to address for safety. Let's start talking about those finances. How do we engage people in our communication? How do we get people in our community that have knowledge and can add that expertise to us? So I think starting with the information we have, let us gather that for you, bring that to CIP, and then determine as you go, because you can add subcommittees at any point in time.
Right, yeah, this isn't like turn the lights on in April and all these, just get in this tired and
It's a couple months worth of work, I think, to do that.
capture this now and then we filter it out. But I do think the CIP, as it was structured, should keep going, because we have a lot of input and insight that needs to be organized. And then people, even before the vote, were asking, I'm summarizing in my own words, what's the acceptable minimum that we could do to the elementary school to keep that going in a healthier way? We have pretty good insight into that and getting it organized and in a shareable,
Prioritize it.
prioritizing and just having that in a shareable, concise, reasonable way for voters to start to learn more about that, I think will help a lot with those conversations. So I think, again, I guess the CIP is probably the one that we have to, I'd say at least to start, because this is not tattooed on our foreheads. If you and I continue with the CIP and the urgency of starting to digest some of that, getting together in the next couple of weeks and starting to work through that, I think that would be the most appropriate. And then thinking about the community engagement and what that would potentially look like. So if that's cool, you brought that up. If you could be thinking about that, we can talk about it more.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that needs to happen fairly soon.
Yeah.
Before you lose steam.
Right. So I'm putting you on the spot for a number of people, but what feels like a right timeline for that? I think CIP needs to keep rolling, and then we can reorganize or add subcommittees and other things.
Yeah.
What do you think on the community engagement?
I I would say it needs to be in the next month.
Yeah, I agree. Scott and Russ, what are your thoughts?
I think you have a strong engagement right now with the community, and why not continue to try to run with that? People are still encouraged.
So I would say as we start to do planning towards the end of the meeting, because we do have other topics to get to, I would say, we do this by discussion, we don't do a motion by second, but I would say to start, are you comfortable with continuing, you and I on CIP?
I am.
One of you were the alternate, do you want to be the alternate? Do you want to be the alternate?
Sure.
Do you want to
Sure.
fight over it?
No, I'm happy to.
Okay, all right, so we'll keep that loose. But where one of us isn't there, you can be there, we don't have the quorum, we're following all the rules. So we'll go forward with the capital improvement to start. And then I'd say we look through our calendars and get a placeholder out to the community for, whatever we wanna call it. People are used to us saying forums, but I
Yeah.
think it's gonna be sort of an education, sharing out, retrospective, starts off, continue type of a thing, and then learning from that.
Yeah, so I guess I would just kind of ask to what extent can we help you to plan that? Because
Oh, I was
I
trying to
think
offer to help you.
That's fine.
Just to be fair. And
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to put some thought into it, so we don't just show up and have a lot of people just, flipping back and forth what their opinions are and,
Yeah.
right, wrong, or indifferent. I think there needs to be some structure around it. We're not going in to present a plan,
No.
but we don't want it to just be an open floor free-for-all either. That's my view.
So you and I are both the most active on this topic, so how about in the short term, I don't know if it needs an official name, you and I can talk about it and we bring back to the board for the April meeting. We do a placeholder for a week or two after the
Yep.
April meeting. You and I work together and say, this is what we would like to do.
Yep.
And why, and the board can weigh in and help us refine it, then the public has enough time to know what's coming. But I would for all of you to plan is getting some key information, and when we get enough of that, hearing from all of you on what your thoughts are and how we can move forward. So similar to how we started last year is my instinct.
And hopefully by then we'll have a pretty good handle on organization of what needs to be done at a level from the DEW reports and
Right.
match report.
Yeah, it gives us some time to filter
Gives us
through
some
that.
time to filter through that and come up with a series of what the priorities are.
Yeah.
Do we have, beyond a community forum, so that's just one idea, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's not gonna tap everybody, and if we look at history, we'll probably get, 125 to 200 people show up at best. And what we're really looking for is to try and expand our reach somehow. So do we have to think about other means by which to try and tap that beyond who might come to a community forum? So we have to have some way in which people can share feedback, good or bad.
Survey,
In a,
meeting,
yeah,
or
I don't know,
otherwise.
yeah, I'm not sure, like, cause I mean, a paper survey in the mail, you're gonna yield maybe 30% response if you're lucky, and it's costly. It's not the best way to do it. We've got a distribution list, but it's probably limited to people who are involved in the school. So we have to kind of think beyond that. How do we solicit and gain feedback, and how do we do it in a way that doesn't make people feel like, I don't know, that they're putting themselves out there if they want to share feedback in an anonymous way,
Right.
right? Because not everybody's going to willingly step up and say, I voted no, and this is why.
No, and a lot of people say they're terrified to get in front of a
Right.
community forum,
Yes.
whether they're for or against, and
Yes.
that shouldn't hinder somebody's right to speak.
Right.
And use their voice. So
Correct.
why don't we
Talk about that too.
talk,
Yeah.
we can come back to the board.
Yeah.
Ideally a three-pronged approach,
Yeah.
however we wanna do that.
And we've got a big audience, so I would open it up to anybody here who has ideas too. Help us figure it out.
So Carrie and I are gonna be working on this, so you can reach out to us, email, and lend your voice to it.
Yeah.
So and then finance, for finance, there's not a lot in the very short term, but we certainly have to have that. And then policy, are you game to lead policy again? And then we can look into next month who fills in as second and alternate.
Well, Ed'll have to fill in because he's not here.
Yeah, what do we wanna give Ed? He's off at that retirement party, not at our meeting.
Ed's gonna have a lot of time on his hands. So.
Yeah. So Scott with policy, pause in negotiations. Ed was leader of finance, and in his absence, I think he'd do a great job of doing that again. He did a good job, so we're all in favor of that, so he signed up. And then, you and I will start in the capital improvements, and then you and I will talk on the side about the community engagement. Do I feel like we can move on?
Yeah.
Seems like a plan.
Okay. Anything you wanna add?
Got it.
I wanna make sure that administration also and staff knows what's going on and how we're doing this. Okay, the yearly conversation on committees. Moving on, I'm looking for a motion to approve the school board meeting minutes from February 5th, 2020, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the February 5th, 2020 school board meeting.
I need a second, please. Andy, is that you?
Yep, I'll second it.
Okay, let me get my notes. Any discussion on the February 5th meeting notes? Our lives are made easier by really good quality notes. I didn't see anything that needed to be changed. All in favor of approving the minutes from February 5th, 2020 school board meeting, please say aye.
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 Aye, unanimous. Minutes from the non-public meeting February 17th, 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the non-public meeting on February 17th.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the non-public meeting February 17th, 2020, please say aye.
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 Minutes of the non-public, motion to approve the minutes of the non-public meeting, March 4th, 2020.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of the non-public meeting March 4th, 2020.
May I have a second,
I'll
please?
second Carrie's motion.
Scott, second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, as noted, please say aye.
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 Unanimous, thank you. Agenda review, I already, I think we went there. Public forum in accordance with policy BEDH, copies available in the back of the room. You love to have you stand over to the side by the camera so people here can hear you and people at home can hear you. This is a chance for us to hear what's on your minds. It's not a Q&A. It's a chance for statement. There's 2 opportunities during the meeting. We went through a lot a few years ago to improve the policy that I understand other boards have borrowed from. I know everybody's tired, but if someone has something they want to say, this is a chance to say it, or I could keep the meeting moving. Kevin?
Where would you like me to stand, sir?
I think that works. People can see you and the camera catches you, which is good.
This is my good side. I have several things to say. I appreciate the fact that this board has brought before this community the issues of the deficiencies, particularly in our elementary school. It hasn't been done for a lot of years, and I appreciate that. I also recognize the fact that the initial proposal last year was defeated. I appreciate the fact that the proposal, which was more comprehensive this year, was defeated. And I've been a strong advocate of both, so I recognize my situation. So I'm more interested in engaging and uniting the community than continuing to divide the community. Couple of things. I think the board should be focused on the issue. The issue is the elementary school. It's not the high school. The high school excels around the state. Let's get back to the elementary school where the deficiencies have been there for 30 years. That's where we started. That's where we need to go back to. And so looking at what's Article 8 and the votes there, I support that. I think we need to create a committee to look at the issues around how do we engage in fixing the issues, life safety issues, not wants, life safety issues and security issues of our elementary school students. And so I want the board to consider that going back to what brought us here. It wasn't the fields, it wasn't the high school, it was the elementary school. we still have a problem with a 90-year-old school that has been failing us for 25 to 30 years. That's where we need to be. That's where a committee needs to be. That's what we need to be focused on. How do we protect our young students? How do we engage them not only in safety, but maybe improving their curriculum for the 21st century? And I don't want to get this diverse thing that divides us about athletic fields in the high school. The high school's third in the state. The athletic fields, they'll survive for a few years, 4 years, I don't know. But the elementary school is crucial. We can't ship out our elementary school students. Who's going to take them? Any ideas, anybody who wants to ship them out? I mean, some would want to pack them all into one building and make a nice, convenient, you know, we got space, put them in a closet. But the issue is the elementary school. That's where the deficiency is. It's not in the high school. Yeah, we have a boiler that's 50, or whatever, created in the 1950s. But it's not. Elementary school we need to be focused on. I'd like to see us take Article 8, get together with a committee of people, Representative Hall, to say, okay, what's our ideas for fixing the elementary school? What's our ideas for keeping our young children safe? And get out of the way of all this stuff that divides us about a high school which is excellent and athletic fields which are, you know, questionable. So I'm asking the board to look at what brought us here. It wasn't last night's vote. It was the 25, 30 years of neglect of the elementary school. That's what brought us here, not the high school, not the fields, the elementary school. Thank you. I got my time managed. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for speaking. Other voices? It's another opportunity. Yes, sir.
I'm Sean Simons, and I agree with everything you say.
I'm Kevin Cooney. He agrees with me.
I also have children, 2 children in the school system right now. And I do see, while I agree with you that the focus should be on the elementary school, I do see the fields are an issue. I've traveled over the years with April and her husband to ball games at other communities where the fields are, you know, we go down to these fields that are facilities that are beautiful while we come back home here and it's a struggle to get time for the younger kids to play ball, and well, because they're fighting with the high school for that same field space. It's some what I feel we should be done is separate the things. You know, you were talking about committees and ad hocs and all that. Set up 2 committees, one for the actual elementary school, what to do for the elementary school, either repair, you know, fix what's there, build a new one, but also the fields, what to do with the fields. How can we fix the fields that we have, or build new fields and try to keep the cost down, but keep them separate. I honestly think that a part of the problem was that everything's was all lumped into one big budget, and I think that's part of the reason why it was too much. If we had the option of choosing all these other things, maybe we could have gotten the school, and maybe the field would have to wait. You know, hindsight 2020, we knew, you know, over the years we've known that the school, the playground, the ball fields were a problem. You know, hindsight says maybe we should have been looking at that sooner so that we could already have those paid for and done, and now we could be looking at the new school. That's all I think.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here and speaking. All right. Presentation. Sunapee Middle High School Mock Trial Harvard Model Congress. We have to vacate, so I'll hop down.
Lay down.
My blinds.
Superintendent Holden, members of the school board, thanks for giving me the opportunity tonight to talk about two lesser-known extracurricular activities that we offer here at Sunapee Middle High School. I think everybody in the room is familiar with the accolades our sports teams have received over the years, well deserved. But we also have two much smaller programs that are also similarly successful. The first program I want to talk about tonight is the mock trial program. What's mock trial? A lot of you guys might be asking. What mock trial is where students get to simulate real court cases. They get a court case at the beginning of the season. They learn to be attorneys. They learn objections. They learn rules of evidence. They serve as witnesses. And then they go and compete against other schools. So our season for mock trial starts in October. We meet basically 2 times a week, maybe 3 times a week, or every day, as we get close to the competition. And that goes all the way through February. This program is a very rigorous activity. We are a small school, and our students are stretched thin. Sean Moynihan up here, he'll talk in a few minutes. Played soccer, played basketball, also did mock trial. So where he found time for homework, not quite sure. As we proceeded, as we get closer to the competitions, which are annually every December and excuse me, every February, the students get more assistance from 2 outside attorneys that work with us. We have two attorneys, Dan Connolly and Lucy Rooney from the Connolly Law Offices in New London, who come in and work one-on-one with the students, help them how to frame an objection, how to frame questioning, how to create leading questions of witnesses. So that way when they go to the competitions, they can compete against other schools and be successful. This past season, we competed at the Bishop Guertin Invitational in December. We are consistently the smallest school to field a team. We are the only school north of Concord to field a team. We are only one of a few public high schools that field a team. Apples to apples here, if we were talking sports, Sunapee High School went up against Pinkerton, Manchester Central, Phillips Exeter Academy. So it's not exactly a level playing field, but we were successful in this. This December we got 3rd place overall, losing to 2 Phillips Exeter Academy teams. But we beat Manchester Central and Souhegan High School. We've also beat St. Paul's, we've also beat Derryfield, so we've quite a bit of success. This year, for the 2nd time as a member of mock trial, we've had an attorney, Sean Moynihan, who's played a role this year as both an attorney and as a witness, who received a distinction as a top attorney in the competition. So, it's a little bit for me as the adults in the room to talk about it, but Sean, I asked Sean to come here, just share his experiences, why he likes mock trial, why it's a beneficial program for students.
Hey, I'm Sean. I've been on the mock trial team for the past 3 years, and although some kids on the team want to go into a career in law, not everyone on the team, including myself, wants to pursue a career in law. But mock trial is still a very beneficial program because it teaches us many life skills, such as public speaking, critical thinking, just thinking on the fly, and competing with other schools is just a very good program that's something outside of, although we have great sports programs, it's something that you can do that's not sports and that's very beneficial and that will prepare you for the rest of your life.
One thing that's interesting to note on the size of the schools that we're competing against, in several years, we've had 10% of our student body at the high school participate in this program. For comparison's sake, Manchester Central, with over 3,000 students, they had 10 kids. Which, if you want to do the math on that, that's a much smaller percentage. So, and again, because we're such a small school, the kids have to double dip. They get involved in many different activities, and they've got to balance their workload. And it's a lot of work, and they do a great job with it. Real quickly, how are the judges, or how are the points determined? They bring in judges, practicing lawyers, practicing judges. Last year, there was actually a Supreme Court judge from the state of Texas who came in and judged. And again, so they're getting legal experts who are watching them. And I think Sean can back me up, that the feedback that we are getting at these competitions is that it's better than professional lawyers who practice in front of them. And so, even though they may not be lawyers, they're really good at thinking on their feet, and they do a great job. So, that's one program that I help lead. The other program that I help lead is Harvard Model Congress, which comes up in front of the school board every year for permission for our trip to Boston. And Harvard Model Congress is a little bit different. It's a huge simulation of the interactions of our government. They simulate different committees in Congress. They simulate councils and the Supreme Court, National Security Council. They basically simulate all aspects of government. And this involves 1,400 other students over 4 days down in Boston that do this. These students come from, we've had international students from around the world go in there. This year there were only 2 schools from New Hampshire that sent students, Sunapee and also Timberland Regional High School. So again, it's we're selecting that, but we get to offer these opportunities to the students. The students every fall will get a packet of materials, of briefings that they must read, written by Harvard College students and Harvard graduate students about issues. So if you are on the National Security Committee, you might be reading about North Korea and issues with North Korea, and should we put more trade restrictions on them. Or there might be crisis meetings that they might get in the news. I imagine if the fear of the coronavirus had happened about a month earlier, that would have been a big topic of discussion there. So they have some topical issues that they come in, and then while they're at this conference, they'll also have some guest speakers. We've heard from former Senator Kelly Ayotte. We've also heard from former Congressman Skylar Hathorn took part this year. She was on the National Security Council, and she actually had a member of the National Security Council who advised President Trump come in and talk to him. So it's another great, unique experience for students. I'll let Skylar speak to her take on it in a second, but I do want to recognize her because the students who do Harvard Model Congress do give up some of their February vacation to take part in it. And Skylar received an award as the top delegate in her committee. It's the first award we received. Skylar can talk a little bit more about her experiences.
So I'm Skylar. This is my first year going to Harvard Model Congress. I'm a pretty opinionated person, and this was a really, really great opportunity for me to just go out there and share what I believe about the briefings and anything. My voice was heard, and because none of these kids really knew me, so I just went out there and gave it my all. I'm also pretty passionate about the stuff that goes on in our country, so I learned a lot, and hearing opinions from these kids from all over the country is just really inspiring. I would highly recommend all the students to go, because you learn not only how to speak, you learn about what's going on in the country, you learn how Congress works. So when I stepped into my committee, well, I was in a special committee, not in a Congress committee, but I stepped in and everyone knew what they were doing and I didn't. So it was a great experience to just learn all that. And if you see me in Congress one day, it's because of Harvard Model Congress. So, yeah.
Do any board members have any questions?
So